Good evening, my lovelies, and welcome. I'm Lady Creepypasta. Do you believe in heaven and hell, my dears? In God and the devil? Or are you one of those who rather believes in all the things in between? Today's tale is by author Fear the Darkness and is from Creepypasta Wiki. So let's dive in, shall we? Come now, my dears. Lean in closer, and we'll begin. It's pretty crazy how life can come at you full force when you least expect it, and certainly when you least want it. My name is Luke Whalen. I was born in Salem, Massachusetts, the supernatural capital of North America, I suppose you could say. I've never considered myself to be superstitious or paranoid, but after what happened to me at my high school several months back, well, let's just say that I've learned to turn a more tolerant ear to such things. This all started when my senior year at Whitmore Valley High School began. I had left my other school and transferred where my dad and I moved here after he and my mom divorced. I didn't really think much of the school when I first walked in. It was the typical working-class educational establishment, filled with mundane teenagers who had a life of struggle ahead of them, and teachers with a lot of regret in their pasts. And, of course, there were those too-cool-for-school teens from high-income families who were being forced to attend school here due to their cheap parents not wanting to send their kids to expensive private institutions. That lot kept mostly to themselves and held the majority of the student body in contempt. The feeling was mutual. I, unfortunately, fell into the former category. My dad had been a school bus driver for as long as I could recall. We had lived in a trailer for the first 10 years of my life until we rented our first apartment when I was 16. This was the only school he could afford to send me to, and we didn't have money for college. I tried not to feel sorry for myself, or at least not to show it, in the knowledge that I would be labeled as emo by the kids here. So mostly, I kept to myself and kept my mouth shut. But I'm getting off topic. Back to the point. My first day was like any other. I went to the front office to grab my schedule, I attended my classes, and memorized the room numbers, and I went to lunch, my favorite part of school. However, when I got to my math class after lunch, that's when things started to get, strange. I walked into the classroom just like any other. It was rather quiet compared to the others. All of the students were in their seats and doing bell work. The teacher's name was Miss Flannery. She was a petite woman who kept to herself most of the time. The students themselves were just like any other. That is, all except one. That's when it all began. That's when I saw her. She was sitting alone at her desk. Her ebony hair was long, free, slightly curled, and reached all the way down her back. She wore a long-sleeved shirt with black pants and black leather heels. She looked seriously out of place, like the kind of person you'd expect to find in a goth nightclub. But she didn't have any makeup on, and her skin was peachy and flushed. She was sitting almost at the back of the room with a look of amusement on her face. She then lifted her head up, looked directly at me, and smiled. I froze in shock. Her eyes were pitch black. I don't mean that her irises were black. I mean her whole eyeballs were black. She blinked once, and her eyes turned to normal. Mrs. Flannery stood from her desk and handed me my bellwork. "Mr. Whalen, your desk is at the end of the room next to Miss Edelon," she said to me in a calm voice. She pointed to a desk at the end of the room. The girl's desk. I walked towards the desk and sat down. My side had a small tag taped with my name written in permanent marker on it. I looked with my eyes only at her tag, which read Elena Edelon. I looked up towards her and saw that her head was turned towards me, a friendly yet somewhat creepy smile on her face. "Hi," she whispered. "I'm Elena." She held her hand out to me. I shook it gently, although the strength of her hand made me think that she could crush me if she wanted. "Luke," I said in silent reply. She released my hand, and I had to rub my palm to alleviate the semi-pain of her grasp. I looked up to see if anyone was looking at us. I hated being the center of attention. To my relief, everyone was caught up in their bellwork. It was almost as if me and Elena were the only lively ones there. It went on like this for an hour and a half, with me focusing on my work and all the while feeling Elena's gaze occasionally on my head. At around 3:28 p.m., the end of the school day, the students were mostly already out of the room, until only Mrs. Flannery, myself, and Elena remained. "Luke, Elena, could you two stay after class to tidy up the room a bit? I've already contacted your parents, and they'll be on their way to pick you up after you're done," Mrs. Flannery asked. I never rejected a chance to help someone, so I agreed, and so did Elena. We cleaned the desks and vacuumed the floor mostly. Cleaning the desks was my favorite, though. Me and Elena would clean the same desks, and usually deliberately, our hands would touch. She would look at me with a smile, and I would smile back. I enjoyed her company, if only for that brief moment. She leaned in close to me, her chest touching mine, and her mouth to my ear. She said, "I'm taking you home with me, angel boy. My father will delight in me when I bring him your soul." I was speechless. Who the fuck was this girl? "Who are you?" I whispered back. She didn't reply, only smiled and walked towards Mrs. Flannery's desk. She placed her arm around Mrs. Flannery's shoulders and ripped out her throat. Blood sprayed the room like paint. I fell to my knees in shock. I ran for the door, but she appeared right in front of me out of nowhere, blocking my path. "You're not going anywhere, my pet," she said. I looked back into the room. It had changed. Chains and hooks hung from the ceiling. Flannery's corpse had come back alive and was walking around the room, and the walls were coated in her blood. I reached for the doorknob and flung open into the hallway. The hall was in a state of decay, as if it had aged 10 years in a matter of seconds, the only light coming from lamps hanging from the ceiling. As I looked further into the hall, I could see people moving towards me. Hey, over here! I called to them. As I got closer to them, I instantly regretted doing this. They were corpses, mutilated and decayed beyond recognition. They looked at me as if I was an invader into their hell, a fallen angel in a world where only creatures of nightmares could lay claim. Now you know how my father felt when he was cast from his homeland. I turned to see Elena standing in the hallway in front of me. My father created me, and those like me, to take vengeance on God. He made it so that every lost soul would fall here, including your kind. I didn't understand a word she said. She was crazy. And make no mistake, Luke, you will be staying with us forever. I knew where I was now. I was in hell, and its daughter had come to chaperone me in. Thank you for joining me this evening, my dears. If you yourself have a story that you'd like me to consider for this channel and podcast, or if you have a story recommendation, reach out to me at lady.mccreepster@gmail.com. Alternatively, you can also find me on social media. I am Lady McCreepster on both Facebook and Twitter. Once again, a very big thank you to my dark family on Patreon for all your support. It really does make a difference in keeping this channel alive. Or rather, in keeping it undead. If you too would like to join my family on Patreon, go to patreon.com/LadyMcCreepster. As little as $1 a month really does go a long way into helping support this channel. Unfortunately, my loves, that is all the time we have this evening. Until next time, sweet dreams.